Hello, this is Daniel Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. And having backed the game for as long as I have, I've seen a number of waves of debate over player versus player combat. These waves have occurred both each time the gameplay evolves in a way that alters the combat equation, and each time CIG's actions or statements have changed. The most recent one seems to have begun when CIG gave short bans to players whose excessive player killings were judged to be targeted harassment, which is a term of service violation. I decided to sit back until the arguments had fully formed and then create a single comprehensive contribution to analyzing the issue. This is it. So sit back, it's going to be a deep dive. Terms such as griefing and piracy have quite varied definitions between players and sometimes are used more as cudgels than actual words, so I'm going to start with some definitions and then go on to ask and answer a couple of basic questions on the subject. The first term is career piracy, which I separate from the broadly misused term of piracy in general. Career piracy is advancing through the criminal seizure of ships and their contents. Yes, pirates blow up ships, but they blow up ships for the same reason miners blow up rocks, to get to the valuable contents. Now, imagine somebody in a prospector blowing up rocks just for the fun of seeing rocks disappear into dust. And if somebody who actually wanted to mine those rocks asked what the heck were they doing, and they replied, well, hey, mining's part of the game, they would likely get the reply of, yeah, but that's not being a miner. In the same way, CIG is under no obligation to accommodate whatever psychopathic impulses someone may have in the game because of piracy. That's not piracy. Next is PvP, which is any game activity which pits one player directly against another player. Wanting to test yourself against others is a perfectly normal human motivation for players. In fact, once a person cares about an activity, they generally, want to be the best at it and to prove that to themselves that they are the best at it. So, for example, chess is a PvP game. You can utterly crush your opponents and brag about it, and nobody will regard you as evil because of it. You might just get to be the main character on a hit Netflix show. On the other hand, PvP is not simply competition. Darts, for example, can be played competitively, but it is not PvP, because you can play darts by yourself, and it is exactly the same experience. The real point is that PvP is a normal inclination of human nature. Put human beings in a shared space with a common activity, and pretty soon, a significant percentage of them will invent some way to contest who is the best, with a reward for the winner and a penalty for the loser. That's not evil. That's just human and competitive. Give them a way for those wanting to contest themselves against each other to do it positively, like hot zones, and most will gravitate right to it. Don't give them a way to do it, and they will find one anyway. Not necessarily one that is fair or constructive, like pad ramming at Port Olisar. Now, part of the culture of online games is that what constitutes a fair contest is much more lenient than in real life. If somebody has a faster internet connection, or a smoother graphics card, or a wider monitor, or 6 Degree of Freedom VR rig, or playing with a meta loadout versus a stock one, none of that is regarded as making it an unfair contest. Although it might feel that way to the loser, and definitely would be regarded as unfair if a contest was so slanted in real life. In fact, consider exactly how many of those things, monitors, graphics cards, processors, etc., you have seen advertised as having the specific benefit of giving you an unfair advantage. Similarly, taking advantage of a tactical situation that puts one side at a disadvantage is not automatically regarded as unfair contest. Ambush is generally regarded as legitimate. Eventually, though, it reaches the point of our next definition, a cheese win, short for cheesy. And a cheese win isn't all that fun for the loser or challenging for the winner. In other words, nobody should brag about a cheese win, and a bounty hunter or pirate with a long history of cheese wins would see their reputation among other players advance slowly, if at all. But if there is a line where a cheese win becomes a punishable offense, then that line needs to be bright. Stream sniping is cheese. Pad ramming is cheese. Sniping helpless minors is cheese. Combat logout is cheese. But if any of them is crossing the line, then that line needs to be well defined. But now we get into defining behaviors that are crossing that line. Ones that aren't just unfair cheese, but a detrimental thing to the game itself. And the first one is the sadistic player. They are just here for the joy of making everyone else miserable. The more miserable they make people, the happier they are. Simple as that. They have transitioned from simply being cheese to being truly cruel. But they are in fact a subset of another group that I call the sociopathic players. Sociopathic players have gone from not just being cruel to other players, but to want to break the game society itself. They are fundamentally angry, and since they cannot direct their anger at the real world and real people, they have decided that the game world and game characters are a suitable substitute, and they are going to take their anger out at by breaking it in every way possible. The thing about sadistic and sociopathic players is that you aren't going to reach them through any game mechanism. Games have often had trouble with sadistic and sociopathic players because the game designers will think that their usual tools for influencing player behavior will work on them. And they won't, because genuinely sadistic and sociopathic players pride themselves in being beyond caring about the game at all. Game currency penalties won't work for them because game currency is lame. Character deaths won't help them because characters are lame. Jailing them in the game world won't work because to them the game world is lame. You won't affect them, and they are proud of that because that is their proof that they are so much bigger than caring about silly games. The best, literally the best you can hope for is that they will get bored or angry and rage quit, and then you'll be done with them. Fortunately, truly sadistic and sociopathic players are rare. But don't pretend that they don't exist. Be willing to recognize them when they do, and don't pretend that you are going to fix them any way but with a ban. A final definition I would like to put out there is a word I used in passing earlier: hot zones. These are specific areas of intense player versus player activity that draws players interested in PvP action and repel players that are not interested in it. The main example of one that we have seen in the game is the old Jump Town. Hot zones can be player generated or game generated, but the main thing about them is that they are known well enough that people know what they are getting into, and if they don't want it, they know to go elsewhere. So, with those definitions out of the way, what are the main topics I want to talk about? The first thing I'd like to discuss is that before anyone talks about making any changes, they should look at the changes that we're already going to have. Because it doesn't take much thought to see that there are things on the roadmap that are going to make huge differences in PvP gameplay. Even if they are not the complete solution, any suggestion about improving PvP that does not take them into account is certainly missing the mark. The first upcoming change is server meshing. In a nutshell, what server meshing means is that instead of thousands of servers, each serving the whole verse to 50 players, there will be thousands of servers, each serving an area as small as a single room. And as you move from place to place, in an elevator, on a train, through a jump point, in quantum, etc., you will have your game session passed from one server to another. So what is currently hard in the game, coming across other players, will become almost automatic. The world will feel a lot more crowded with other players. So, on a 50-player server, if you are there as a criminal, the odds are that among the no more than 49 other players, that there is a bounty hunter of your level is low. If you are there as a bounty hunter, the odds of the no more than 49 other players there would be a comparable criminal with a bounty nearby is also almost nil. But after server meshing, the pool of available players that can traverse the mesh of servers and get to you is in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands. If you are a wanted criminal, the chances that someone is actively hunting you goes from minuscule to almost certain. Not only that, but with mesh servers, the hunters can effectively form information nets. So when you think you are getting away from your adversary by quantuming away, you are likely just quantuming towards his associate at your destination. Moreover, the rumor outpost that with 50-player servers you are almost certainly all alone at will, with server meshing, likely have dozens of players present who might be one of those associates. Server meshing might even make a success of one of the prior failed attempts at supporting PvP. I'm speaking of opposed missions. The idea of opposed missions was that you would accept one mission and somebody else would be offered the opposing mission. But with only 50-player servers, the chances that somebody would, at the same time, be ready and interested in accepting the opposing mission was almost nil. That will not be the case when the available pool to accept the opposing mission is in the thousands. The next upcoming system that will completely change PvP is the ongoing development of the reputation system. This will let players interested in PvP have the gameplay be part of picking sides in a genuine game world-related conflict, or to decide not to be part of it at all. So, for example, imagine two diametrically opposite factions, A and B. Having reputation with one automatically disqualifies you from the other. So there is some place that we'll call Hot Zone Alpha. Faction A sends its player to Hot Zone Alpha and tells them to clear that out of anyone with Faction B, and Faction B does the same with their loyalists. Meanwhile, anybody who does not want any part of this doesn't try to get reputation with A or B, and as a result will have no idea where Hot Zone Alpha is and may not even know that it exists at all. I'll delve more into the specific possibilities of this later. The third system that will completely change PvP in Star Citizen is a fully realized medical and death counts, eventually leading to permadeath, also known as the Death of a Spaceman system. It's hard to predict exactly how this will change PvP, but it obviously will. Anything that makes death more consequential will make players approach the risk of defeat differently. Major PvP battles in hot zones will likely be turned by the side that has prepared most and staged medical support and a ready reserve of ships. Just bringing a pilot back doesn't mean much if you don't have anything for them to fly. So large-scale PvP in the persistent universe is likely to be a quite involved matter in operational planning to be more than momentarily successful. That hard-to-define quality called generalship will become invaluable. Finally, the fourth upcoming system that I want to group together is a number of features that will affect career piracy PvP. That is the cargo refactor, physicalized components, towing, salvage, and breaching. These are going to make career piracy a very different experience than what most users are calling piracy now. With these features, career piracy will be one of the most involved gameplay loops of any career, involving disabling, breaching, boarding, hacking, looting, and salvage. A complete end-to-end piracy of a freighter will likely take hours for an entire org to do. So, to reiterate, 4 key transforming systems for PvP, all of them in the pipeline, and all of them have to be taken into account before you suggest some other change. Next, I want to talk about the 4 really big picture issues for the success of PvP in Star Citizen. First, the most important thing for Star Citizen to get right is that the main PvP structure of the game cannot be pirates versus prey. Why? Because being prey is no fun. So if the main PvP structure of the game is one side having fun, taking away the fun of the other side, then it sure does look like sadistic gameplay, or what most people would call griefing, doesn't it? Not to mention that since freighters will never match a meta-build warship, it pretty much automatically makes any win a cheese win. So the main piracy PvP structure of the game must be pirates versus pirate hunters, with the prey becoming instead the prize that the pirates are seeking and the pirate hunters are protecting. Sure, the prize will throw in on the side of the protectors, but they aren't automatically set for being a victim of an almost certain cheese defeat. That is the key of keeping it from being griefing. So attention needs to be regularly given to be sure that the pirate hunter is a competitive career path to being a pirate. Is it too hard for the pirates to be found? Is it less profitable? Is it too easy for the pirates to escape? Does it cost so much for freighters to hire security that they become unprofitable and can't get pirate hunters? The freighters, miners, etc. will be on the side of the pirate hunters, of course, but they can't be the main ones carrying the burden of keeping the pirates at bay. It's just unbalanced. Of course, there may be other PvP structures, such as mercenary versus mercenary, but those are relatively easy to keep balanced compared to pirates versus pirate hunters. The second big picture is, what makes a safe system genuinely safer, and not just a word? So, for example, Stanton is described as a safer system, and Pyro a dangerous system, but there is nothing to limit player career pirates from working in Stanton. Are those anything but useless words? If a freighter captain has to spend just as much money hiring security for a trip in Stanton as a trip to Pyro, nothing is actually safer from a practical standpoint at all. Players can work to try to make a reality of Stanton being a safer place than Pyro, but they can't be solely relied on it because at any moment the servers may have more pirates than non-pirates in one place or the other. To make a system safer, not just in word, but in reality, it boils down, just like in real life, to just one thing. If you call for help, help comes. Let's start with the flaws of the current system of player-created service beacons. The first is that it takes too long to create one to be feasible to do when under attack. It then expects that players can be relied on to respond to player-created beacons. In addition, they are sent to everybody, so they just become so much noise and ignored. Creating a distress call must be so simple that it can be mapped to a hotkey. If in the middle of a battle, I have to stop piloting, open up a mobi-glass, fill out a form, skip it, I'm already dead. There is a hotkey for eject, there's a hotkey for self-destruct. There is no reason not for there to be a hotkey for a distress call. If you are in good to neutral reputation with the local authorities and there is a functioning comms array, that hotkey should create a distress call noting both the direct rewards of the bounties on everybody within sensor range. Note that in order to create a distress call, the player must be in good standing with the local authorities and there must be in range of a functioning comm array. In other words, the incentive for turning off the comm arrays would switch to making it impossible to call for help, which makes sense, rather than there being no crime stat, which frankly makes no sense. If an insurance company is going to process a claim on a multi-million credit spaceship, they are going to demand an investigation into what happened and accountability for those responsible, comms array or not. So that creates the call for help. How do you make sure the help comes and, if possible, the help is coming from players? Just having a service speaker request pop up is mostly ignored. Instead, I would suggest that there be a return to something along the lines of the old patrol missions. If you are in good reputation with, say, for example, Crusader Security, you will be offered these new style patrol missions. They will pay you a certain UEC per minute to just travel a randomly selected route and be on call. If a distress call comes in while on a patrol mission, you must accept it and head promptly to the location, or you will lose reputation, forfeit your payment, and be dropped from the mission. If there are insufficient player pirate hunters on patrol within the same planetary system as the distress call, the game will spawn a sufficient number and strength of NPC pirate hunters and dispatch them. So, whether by players or non-players, the fundamental distinction of a safe system will be met. If you call for help, help comes. The next big question is, what needs to be changed in the current prison system in order for it to be actually effective in altering the worst player behavior? Because obviously it isn't. So why isn't it? Well, the first and most obvious culprit is the offline serving of time. Players just switch to an alt character when one gets jailed, and even if they aren't caught during a play session, they will deliberately get caught at the end of it so that they can start the next play session freshly greened. The second thing is the earning of merits simply by time. Because even if they got rid of the offline serving of time, it would just encourage the use of a second system and have the player just standing there with a macro to keep the character from timing out from inactivity. Both are solved with a simple technique. Have there be a check-in station spaced all over the prison, including in the mines. Every 4 to 6 minutes, a check-in alarm is sounded, giving the player a 60-second window to go and use the check-in station. A successful check-in gives 300 merits instead of 1 merit per second under the current system. Essentially the same. Using the check-in stations too early or too late costs 200 merits, so it will be very difficult to completely automate. The third problem that prison sentences cap at crime stat 5, not the actual criminal record. Now, capping bounties and restrictions at crime stat 5 is fine, but capping the actual sentences at crime stat 5, it means that the player, once crime stat 5 is reached, nothing matters anymore. And when nothing matters anymore, there's no crime system. Just do anything. So obviously, while the other effects of crime stats, such as bounty size, will cap at 5, the actual criminal sentence must be based on the full unserved criminal record. No sensible criminal justice system, past, present, or future, would do otherwise. But would this result in truly unreasonable sentences? Not necessarily. Players participating in hot zones will be protected by the sponsoring faction, and genuine career pirates, as we said, will have long stretches between actual attacks on ships to accommodate all the looting, salvaging, and such. So really racking up a huge sentence would only happen to the people shooting up everything mindlessly. And then to wrap it up with prisons, there needs to be some sort of cap on the trading and accumulating of prison merits. Right now, thanks to prior bugs, there are billions of merits sitting in some accounts. Then there needs to be some sort of limit on merit trading, perhaps some maximum transaction size, or not being to be able to send merits to or from people not currently in prison. My final big picture question is, can a variety of hot zone PvP locations be integrated into the geography and lore of Stanton, or do we have to wait for some other systems to be built? I can think of at least 3 uniquely different scenarios allowing for hot zones, well away from the general gameplay areas, and I will leave it to your imagination to think of others. The first is the Aaron Halo, an area so large that it could easily accommodate 1,000 hot zones and still have so much space that peaceful miners would find it almost impossible to run across one by accident. So what's the scenario? Well, it's known in lore that for some reason the UEE didn't sell the Aaron Halo to a corporation like it did the other planets, despite the huge total resources involved. So who really is in charge of it? Well, let's say there's a Sub-Rosa faction on ArcCorp who wants to establish that the Halo is under the jurisdiction of ArcCorp. After all, they've used so much of it in their city building, essentially by using squatter rights. While an equally doesn't officially exist, group in Crusader thinks the opposite because, hey, solid mass is a comparative scarcity in a gas giant. So first of all, they are interested in paying for information on discoveries in the Halo and valuable locations, and so a profit route for the exploration gameplay. But even more important, when something interesting or valuable is found, particularly rich ore, wreck, relic, whatever, there is immediate attempt to make sure that they get it and the other guys don't. A perpetual cycle of hot zones. Another potential setting is the answer to the question, what location in the Stanton system must exist, but is so neglected that it doesn't get included even when you zoom out 100% in the star map? The answer is Microtech L3. CIG has been treating the Grange points as if they were all the same, which is a shame because they're not. L3 points are always completely on the other side of the sun from their planets, which in the case of a distant planet like Microtech is a long way. They're also never on a direct travel path because the sun is in the middle, and never in direct communications for that same reason. So it is easy to see, particularly with Microtech's self-centered culture, that the L3 station might have reacted to so much distance and neglect with a vigorous autonomy rebellion. So let's presume that Microtech L3 has set up an anarcho-syndicalist commune. Every so often, the Microtech board realizes that they've lost control of their L3 point and sends some trusted mercenaries to go reassert control, while the anarcho-syndicalist commune's bi-weekly meeting has endorsed by a 2/3 majority of the rotating chief executive's hiring of loyal mercenaries to oppose. So you have a hot zone around the blockade and clearing the blockade of a station. Sounds good even for those who didn't catch the Monty Python reference. To be complete, a full set would then still need hot zones for ground combat and one for org versus org battles. So let's try to do one for both. In lore, one of the contributing reasons for Hurston being such an ecological disaster is that it was used for weapons testing. Well, let's just presume that Hurston still has large testing zones and the company still gives short-term leases to favored customer orgs for the purpose of conducting military training exercises. Some might even have a sort of resource that nominally provide a prize for the victors. So essentially, for a fee, you get to specify which orgs will be on your side and which orgs will be on the other side, and anything that happens inside the zone is just a training exercise. So let me summarize. 1. Career piracy is criminally seizing ships and their contents. Random pathological urges is not piracy. 2. PvP is a form of normal human competitiveness. Give it a constructive outlet or it will create its own, likely destructive, outlet. 3. Sadistic and sociopathic players are a perversion of healthy competition and can likely only be addressed through bans. 4. Hot zones are a good structure for constructive PvP, as desiring players can go there and non-desiring players can avoid them. 5. Server meshing will radically alter PvP by greatly increasing the pool of willing PvP opponents being potentially able to find each other. 6. Further development of factions will give PvP desiring players a way to take sides in broad world conflicts, and for non-PvP players to avoid them. Career piracy will be evolving into a gameplay in which conquering ships will just be the start of a long process of converting those conquests into wealth. 8. The primary conflict model of piracy must not be pirates versus prey, but pirates versus pirate hunters, with the freighters, etc. positioned as the prize being fought over rather than the victim. This will require careful attention to the role of the pirate hunter. 9. The thing that makes a safe system actually safer is that if you call for help, help comes. There needs to be an easy way to make distress calls and a way to be sure that there will be a response, whether player or otherwise. 10. Basic changes are needed to return the prison system to being a relevant factor in the risk-reward structure of the game. 11. There are relatively straightforward ways that faction, hot zone, PvP can be added to the Stanton system without having to retcon lore, and definitely not needing reactionary ideas like isolating servers. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you appreciated my going into such a deep dive on this topic, please click like, even if you certainly did not agree with everything I said. In addition, I'm trying to get my channel to the point of being monetized, so every extra subscription is essential and welcome. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.